enough of that. Let's get started talking about this this giant B29. So this thing's a 20-foot wingspan B29, originally mastered and flown by Mac Hodges and his team of magnificent builders and designers. Powered by 4 DA100s originally. Unsure what we're going to plan as far as power for this one. It'll definitely be a couple of at least 100 cc's, maybe some GP123s, who knows. We'll see when we get there, but it'll definitely be gas powered. Just way too much effort trying to make something like this electric, if you would even consider something like this to be done electric. But here you can see we've got one of the wing panels. I spent a couple of hours this afternoon while the kids were doing schoolwork. Matter of fact, I think they're still up there doing schoolwork. But I spent a couple of hours and we got pretty much the wing sanded down to just the raw fiberglass and wood structure. There's a couple of breakthroughs here in areas where we went through the fiberglass, but it's mostly just fiberglass here in a good bit of spots. You can see there's some low areas that are still primer. The airplane, this wing panel itself, is actually in really good shape. There's only a few areas that are a little bumped up. One here being right here at the front of the nacelle and this forward wing tube, which is probably where we'll start working on the repairs first. And I've had a couple people ask me, when it comes to big projects, where do you start on something like this? And my dad joke answer is the beginning. This will be the majority of the work, is right here in the wing root in this forward wing tube area. We do have the big chunk of the wing that is missing. We do have that, thankfully, so that will make life a little bit easier. And then the next big area that will need some work on is out towards the wingtip. The upper wing skin has actually delaminated itself and taken a little bit of styrofoam away with it when the wingtip came off. So that's enough about this wing panel. We'll talk about the rest of the airplane as we get there. So when it comes to replacing wing tube socket, that's really what we're working on with this airplane, or at least this wing panel at the moment. What you can see is we have styrofoam, some wing skins, there's a spar here, and then there should be a socket where you see this wing tube. This is a 1.5 inch wing tube. This is the original socket material that was used, that I had laying around from past projects. And unfortunately, the socket is broken here inside of the foam core. You can see the skin is actually split where it began to pull out, and then outside of the nacelle is actually in pretty good shape. But what I want to do is I want to remove this socket, and I'm going to replace it with another socket that is called a blue tube. And if there's anybody who's into model rocketry, you'll know blue tube because they are specific to the model rocket community. I believe they use these for higher powered rockets, and the thickness of these is almost double of what this original phenolic tube is, but these things are significantly stronger. So I'm gonna use a blue tube just to add a little bit of extra strength back into it. It's really, they're heavier. They're probably double of what the conventional phenolic socket weighs, but unfortunately these things are almost impossible to find. At least I haven't been able to find any. And I prefer the blue tube just because of the extra thickness, and the blue tube actually fits onto the wing tube itself with a lot tighter of a fit, so it's just a nicer product in my opinion. The blue tube comes from, I believe, Apogee Rocketry. So if you ever scratch build some stuff and you need some blue tube, that's where you get it. So first thing first, before we start ripping stuff apart, you want to try and get everything back to the position that it was originally in. Thankfully, this rear wing tube socket is in good condition. It does not have any tears or anything in it. So I've got a scrap piece of 1.5 inch wing tube material here. I'm going to put this scrap piece of phenolic socket on that. And then you see I have another piece of wing tube material. This wing tube actually goes all the way to the end of it. You hit it, it stops. And then I have this scrap piece of phenolic material here. This phenolic tube does come through this root rib just a little bit, so I'm actually going to push this phenolic tube in there just to make sure it is positioned nicely. Next thing you want to do is you want to make up a jig. This is kind of where these phenolic tube sockets are going. I've got a piece of, well, 2 pieces of scrap 1/4 inch plywood here. This is light ply. Drilled a couple of holes, and then I put the tube through the holes. For making the holes, I used a Forstner bit, a 1.5 inch Forstner bit to be exact, and then I put the aluminum tube into the hole. The 1.5 inch tube fits in the 1.5 inch Forstner hole very well. Take the socket, put around it, trace it with a Sharpie, pull it back out, take it to your drill press with a nice 1/2 inch or 1 inch drum sander, and go in there and just sand it out until you get a nice good fit with the socket material. See, like I said, these are 2 pieces. They have been glued together very loosely. Just a couple of tack glues here in a couple of places. Then you pop the 2 pieces apart, and now you have matched pairs of these. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to slide these onto the wing tube sockets. This is why you want a nice tight fit, so you can get these on here, and these are going to become a jig. So once this forward tube comes out, the socket itself comes out, I should say, this will nicely locate the replacement socket that we're going to go put in here. And I am going to set this up to where it is completely flush with that wing rib. Then I'm going to take the other one and do the same thing with it. And you want to try and get these as far apart from each other as possible, so you get a nice good triangulation setup going. We can sit here and grab it by one of these. Yeah, that comes off nicely. Like I said, it's a little tight on this forward tube just because of it pinching it, because the socket fit, the fit of this plywood is just a little tight on the socket, but that should do nicely. Yeah, that'll work perfect. All right, so now we can take this whole assembly back out. And now we got to sit here and figure out a way of getting this socket out of the wing. Sorry for the noise. So looking down here into this wing tube socket, let me see if I can get a good view of it, and I'll grab a flashlight as well. You can see that it is just kind of all messed up down in there. It's got a bunch of stuff. Luckily, since these are kind of a woven type material, or not really woven, but I guess twisted, I'm hoping that my buddy's idea of getting in there with some pliers and just twisting it will allow it to kind of just twist its way out of there. Now if I could just find my long needle nose pliers that have apparently disappeared on me. You gotta love it when your tools disappear, don't you? Well, we'll just use this. Swoop, here they are. They're hiding under the rest of them. So we're just gonna come in here and we're gonna twist it. See how this method works, and of course it just breaks off in pieces. This what happens when something's built really nicely. It's glued together too good.